Well, everybody, welcome to Southland's Parenting Podcast, where we are impressing upon parents what must be impressed upon kids, because you cannot give what you don't have. It just keeps getting better every time.
Sounds rich.
Yeah. I listen to this podcast where they do a segment called Comments from the Haters.
Yeah.
And it's really funny because the guy who hosts it, he has this little reverb button he can hit, so he always introduces it and then goes, Comments from the Haters. And then he'll emphasize different syllables at different times. So can I get a little reverb? But can I get one of those? Man, I'll be a podcasting machine if you just give me one little toy like that.
Give me a couple little buttons.
Oh,
That's
man.
right. That was pretty good right there. An applause button.
Oh, that'd be
Listen
a
to
little
that
laugh
crowd.
track.
That's right.
Oh, that'd be good.
That'd be good.
A little Scooby-Doo laugh track.
I want the
Yeah.
I need that button.
Yeah.
Hey, there is, for those who are listening to this here in Central
What is this
Kentucky
podcast, by the
area,
way? I'm just
about
kidding.
parenting, there's what was the Scooby-Doo mystery wagon? The Mystery Machine.
Yeah.
Have you seen it around here?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
awesome. I mean, it's really recently painted. Like, it's
They're in
fresh.
car line behind us almost every day.
Oh, well, that segues nicely
Yeah,
into what we're talking
Yeah.
about today.
Yeah.
Is we talk about schools.
We
Well,
have a Ghostbusters vehicle in our neighborhood.
really?
Yeah, like the station wagon. It's white. It's got a Ghostbusters sign on it. I'm like,
It's my day.
Who drives it?
I don't
need
know.
to know.
I don't know. I'll take a picture of it.
It's a lot of financial investment to
I'll
make
take a
people
picture.
laugh.
I
I'm
know.
appreciative.
I mean,
Every time I
Makes
see
me
that
happy.
that mystery machine, I just laugh.
I know,
I
it's
see it
great.
all the time now. I mean, it stands out. So
You got
whoever,
to really love something.
whoever you are out there, I hope you're a listener. I'd like to talk to you. So
Swing by.
Hey, just reviewing kind of where we've been. So, the essence of this podcast is really to talk about parents, talk to parents about what we have to make sure is going on in our hearts, our minds, our souls, in hopes that that will overflow into the lives of our children. And one of the things we talked about in a recent podcast was finding our identity in our kids. And when we live out of our identity as God's children, we don't try to find our identity in our children. And that's a key component. Today, I want to introduce Ephesians 6:4, which is a small little verse that can be easy to miss, but it has massive ramifications. All right, so this is the way it reads. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. There's a couple things that stand out there. One is it's explicitly addressed to fathers in the context of verses that were addressed to children and talking about parenting, but it's like Paul just goes, hey, fathers, let me get your attention. He kind of does what I do sometimes preaching, like, look right at me. You get that sense that he's going, I need to talk to you first. And that's another discussion for another day on why he would address specifically fathers first, but this verse certainly includes parents in this decision, fathers and mothers. And so the idea there is a really intriguing one. It's pretty fascinating. First of all, don't provoke your children to anger. Literally kind of translates like don't back them into a corner. Don't put them in a no-win situation.
Lose-lose.
And I think one of the reasons Paul addresses fathers there is that we uniquely, unfortunately, have a tendency to do that. Fathers, we can really back our kids into a corner where their fight or flight tends to kick in. But rather, he says, bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. And there's kind of two different words that are very similar to each other being used there, discipline and instruction. The discipline side is like the corrective, like, hey, stop that. Don't do that. Yeah. The instruction is the proactive, like, yes, do that, like casting vision. Like, this is the path to walk in, go do that. So the idea in the context at the time in the Roman world that would have been really familiar to everybody was there was kind of a burden on Roman citizens, and Roman citizenship was a really big deal. They wanted to train and raise their kids in such a way that they would be like the ideal citizens of the ideal, what they perceived to be the ideal place or kingdom or rule. So Paul redeems this word and basically says, hey, we want to train and raise up our children to be right at home in God's kingdom, which has a totally different set of values, a totally different mindset than the Roman kingdom that we're all witnessing and a part of right now. So all that to say, if the burden is on us to make sure that we train and raise up our children in such a way that they would be right at home in God's kingdom if it were to come to earth, in its fullest form today, well, then that means that where our kids spend up to 8, 9, 10 hours a day for maybe 9 months out of the year, really matters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So today what I want to talk to you guys about is this thing called school choice. And so controversial
It's just
subject.
an easy one.
Yeah, it's a real
Softball.
easy one. We'll make nobody mad in this one.
Yeah.
It's probably worth saying, like, right out of the gate, like, I don't have any kind of real agenda in this whole thing. I do want to talk about what reality is, and we basically just talked about it, is that it is not somebody else's responsibility to oversee the education of our children. It's our responsibility as parents. That's what the Bible teaches us. And so with that in mind, there's a whole bunch of decisions that you can make, a whole lot of choices that you can make. And so I've had kids be homeschooled. I've had kids in private Christian school. I've had kids in public school. In fact, the only of my 4 children that has not had some sort of kind of diverse background in that regard has been Bo, because he's the youngest and he's been in the same school since he's been here in Kentucky. But the rest have had all 3 experiences. And so we have intentionally made those decisions along the way. Now, that being said, why don't you guys kind of jump in and talk to the audience about what was your growing up experience in school, and how did that maybe shape your mind about schools as you became a parent?
Mm-hmm. You want to go first?
Makes no difference. I'll do this one. So back in the day before there was these things such as cell phones and DVD players and VCRs and
We had like beta VCRs and VHS.
Well, yeah, and I'm a little older than you, so
not much though.
We had a microwave that was gigantic. I mean, you could have put a whole
knobs
turkey in there,
and dials,
yeah,
and
yeah,
all kinds of switches.
When you
didn't know what they were
when
for.
you had 3 channels and no remote control,
UHF, VHF. Remember that
antenna.
UHF channel?
That's right.
Yeah,
kids, this is what a remote is. You
Yeah.
get up when your dad tells you to move to 32.
that's
Yeah.
right.
For the most part, you just went to the school that was in your district, just where you lived. And so that's what I did. And until busing came in. Busing was big in the early 80s, and they were trying to bring diversity to schools, and I didn't seem to have a problem with it, but there was a lot of people that did. And I think, with mob mentalities and culture, creating fear, all these type of things. So there's all types of things that were happening to an effort to try to either keep your kid in their own district and not. So basically, I think there was supposed to be 3 years of my schooling, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, and 7th grade, that I was supposed to go to. I was going to be bused.
Yeah.
And so in 2nd grade, and by the way, we didn't go to church.
Yeah.
Parents weren't Christians. We didn't do any of that. And so in 2nd grade, all of a sudden, my family, we're in a car driving to this little Christian school over by the airport in Louisville. And they said, hey, listen, whatever they say, we go to church. Because they're trying to get me in this Christian school because they're freaking out about me having to go downtown. And so they did that for a year. And I'm sure, it cost some money.
Yeah.
And then in 3rd grade, and honestly, I remember some of it. It was so, so weird because we didn't have any of that instruction. None of that was ever talked about. And I even have little 2nd grade paper where I've got, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength, which is wild. Yeah. And believe none of it, really. And then in 3rd grade, I ended up in Brandeis, downtown Louisville, and it was just school, And then I grew up basically at a middle school and a high school where there was a bunch of diversity, and it was fine.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about you, Jess?
I also started out in public school. My parents bought the house that they lived in and have literally never moved, and I don't think ever will. Yeah. So that was not chosen based on this is the school district we're in that I'm aware of, because I don't think kids were on the radar, but that's just where they lived.
Sure.
And as it happened, I could walk to school from where we were. So they didn't let me do that as kindergartner, obviously. But it was also where I went to elementary school was an interesting, they mixed classes. So 1st and 2nd grade was the same class.
I remember that experiment because I worked in some classes like that. And I remember thinking, this is the dumbest idea I've ever seen.
It was
I don't know how you felt about it, but it was a massive classroom. There's 80 kids up in here. What are we doing?
Well, and the room's subdivided in the middle, but not really. So you did a lot of stuff together, but then there were things that they'd go, oh, well, your reading is this, so we're going to send you to this class. It was real messy.
Oh, yeah,
so
it was convoluted.
Yeah, but, it was close, and that's why they sent me there, and it was great. And I can remember I walked to school one day because I was adamant that I was old enough to walk to school by myself with my friends.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure there was a car trucking right
Trailing.
along to make sure that I
Creepo.
made it there.
Oh,
No,
okay,
it was
okay.
mom and dad.
Yeah. It was parental
Yeah.
creepos.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, which I get
Yeah.
now, but at the
Yeah,
time I was like,
absolutely.
it's not that far. I can do this. It's fine. I'm a second grader, whatever. But then in third grade, my mom ended up getting a job at one of the Christian schools in town. So they moved us to that school, and I finished out my school career, whatever you call it, there. And I remember being real bitter about it when I got to like high school, because at the time Scapa was like the thing if you're in arts, and we did not have a very big arts program at the school I was at. And so I was real disgruntled about the fact that I couldn't go there because they said I couldn't go there. And now I understand why. You know, I'm like, well, sure, you wanted values placed in me that I wasn't going to get there. But at the time, I was just like, but I love music. Why can't I do this? So I do remember being real frustrated with that. But I finished out 3rd through 12th grade in a Christian school.
Yeah. So moved around a bit before I moved here in 4th grade. And so I started school in a public school in a suburb of Cincinnati. Had a great experience, got chicken pox, you know.
Yeah.
That was back when they would intentionally expose you.
Yeah.
So yeah, somebody in the I always make jokes, you know, all the kids from broken homes. I always had to be dropped off at like it felt like 4 a.m.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was like
I got to get to work.
all the single moms would drop off, and there was like a pre drop off time.
Yeah.
You know, all of us would walk in with, you know, your parents divorced too? Yeah, me too. You know, but anyway, somebody there, they got chicken pox, and so they literally like made me like hug the person. You know, I'm like, oh, how far we've come now
Get
to
it. Just
COVID.
get it.
You know, like everybody's wearing hazmat suits. Back in those days, we just gave each other a hug and got it over with. So, so went to public school in kindergarten, 1st grade. Then we moved to Dallas, Texas. Lived in what at the time was a really rough part of town. Our house got broken into a bunch of times. Everybody around us got broken into. Alleyway behind us, we used to find hypodermic needles in. I mean, it was pretty rough. And so my mom and my grandparents who we lived with at the time, they found some little Christian school to send me to, and man, I hated this place. I mean, I just hated it with a
you were
white hot
afflicted with that
passion.
too, huh?
Yeah, it was weird because looking back, you know, it's Dallas, Texas.
Yeah.
And they had us wear these uniforms that were just so hot, man. It was long sleeve white shirts, these like black or blue pants and dress shoes. You know, you get sent out to recess, it's like 98,000 degrees, and you look like a bunch of Mormon missionaries out there. And it
your
was
hush puppies
just,
on?
there was no grass anywhere. It was all sand. You know, I just went, this place is miserable. They made us, all the Bible stuff we did was in the New American Standard. For some strange reason, I remember that was their translation they were really adamant about. Had kind of a Bible class thing there. And so I don't even remember why. I need to have my mom on the podcast and ask. She took me out of that school. Don't know why.
Yeah.
Put me in another Christian school in town. This one was like birth through 12th graders, all in the same building. So I'm in 3rd grade, and this teacher I've talked about before that used to grab me by the ear and pull me around. Yeah. And actually, she's one of my favorite teachers I've ever had, because she's the one who figured out that I really enjoyed reading and all that kind of thing, gave me books like crazy. So actually, I look back fondly and go, man, she was the best.
She smarter to you,
Yeah, so, and that was, you know, it's Texas, too, so you're allowed to hit kids back then and all that kind of
Anybody else been paddled here?
Yeah,
I mean,
I have to. I've been,
100%.
hey, I've been
100%.
paddled in this building, so
Buddy.
not sure if the statute of limit actually was legal back then. So right down the hall from where we sit right now. So science class got pulled out of there.
That later. I need
7th grade was my last paddling.
I was 7th grade as well.
Yeah. And then I went home and got it too.
Yeah, that
I was going to say it happened
It's
at
just
home.
everybody's
Come on.
being you. What you do?
Man, I thought we were
dummy. Neighbors pulling their belts off.
Nobody even asked why.
No.
Just wait till it's over.
Just running through a gauntlet of belts.
That's right. So yeah, get through that school, move here, and go to Lexington Christian Academy here from 4th grade all the way through 9th grade. Got kicked out of Lexington Christian Academy, ended up at Paul Lawrence Dunbar High School, finished the rest of my time there. So that's kind of my weird and strange
Look
trip.
at him now. God is good.
Yeah. So I had every kind of experience with the exception of homeschooling. I never did that. In our day, you know, homeschooling was like, man, you wore a bonnet and you were churning butter.
I didn't know anybody.
No, I didn't.
It's like knowing aliens.
I
really.
had friends who, there's a friend friend of mine who I had come up in school with through middle school, and at some point, about halfway through, her parents decided we're going to do homeschool, but they joined one of the like co-op groups. Yeah. So she was like, it's not really that different. I just don't do as much work during the day. So I don't know, but
I'm ahead of you. I'm in third grade. I'm doing ninth grade math.
Yeah, exactly.
Jeez,
you don't have,
hold on.
You don't have to wait on
that.
everybody else.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So now
parent-teacher conferences. Your mom's talking to herself.
Every day.
That's right.
Yeah. So now, fast forward a bit. Mm-hmm. You guys have kids, and at some point, you got to send them off somewhere. Mm-hmm. And if you haven't decided to homeschool, that kind of thing. So how did you go about making that decision? Do you remember it even being a decision? What were you considering at the time? What was kind of your worldview?
It was definitely a decision for us. So my oldest was not in daycare because of the way work worked out. I was able to take care of her, and then we had my parents and stuff who would help out. So she didn't really do daycare. I think we may have done one like parents' day out thing, but that was about it. So for her, it was a pretty quick jump into school. And I do remember having a lot of discussion with Chuck and other people that we knew who had older kids just about, what have you chosen? Why have you chosen it? What can we afford? Which is a huge thing. Where we live, what school district are we in? What are the stats of that school? It was a whole thing. And with your first kid, you're way more strict
involved.
And like, I need to know all the things. Yeah. Ella has ended up just doing basically whatever Ashland's done. So, but it's worked out. But we had a lot of conversations, and with where we're districted and things like that, we were just, and especially the way that, and we can dive deep into this, but the way that what schools are influencing and what teachers are influencing and what they're being forced to teach on some levels and impart to kids and even just put up in the walls of the school, we were concerned about putting her in public school where we currently live anyway. So we started looking into different private schools and what the options were and how much they cost and what we could afford, and did a whole lot of budgeting and things like that, and ended up putting her in a really small Christian school for the first couple of years, which was fine. I loved what she was being taught in the classroom. We loved that it was all biblical worldview based. So it wasn't, there were a lot of outside things that we were going to get the opportunity to talk to her about first, as opposed to her encountering it, which was really important. However, the opportunity side, that's the flip side to this. You have less extracurriculars and less sports and less theater or whatever it is that she might be into.
So even if it's not your kids that need them, there's less available.
Exactly. And the smaller the school is, they do great with what they have, but do they even go all the way through 12th grade? There's just a lot in there. So we figured out pretty quickly that while we appreciated what they were doing for her and her interest and her needs, that was not going to be a long-term solution. So we started kind of looking around, and we've been fortunate in that we've had folks who teach at certain schools, so we're able to kind of get a little bit of inside information on that. It helps us a little bit financially on that side. So we actually ended up putting both of the girls in LCA last year. And then Ella started kindergarten this year. So she's actually enjoying what school really is, which this morning the car ride was, I hate school.
Yeah, well, everybody has that
like, girl,
conversation
you got 13 years of this, so
it's every day.
Just get ready. Yes. But that
tell her to come see me.
Oh, gosh. I know. But, it's worked out great for them because they're being taught what we think is important for right now. Yeah. I don't know that they'll be there forever. It's entirely possible that once they have that grounding and that basis that they can stand on their faith really well, that they may go, hey, I am interested in this, and we're going to need to go here, or we may move. Who knows what's going to happen? So we're not locked into this is
don't
forever.
Be moving far. What are you talking about?
To Nicholasville.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's cool.
Wilmore,
we have a Nicholasville campus.
You just got real nervous. So that was great.
Take my boss hat out here in a second.
She's heading to Nashville.
No.
She's going to do this.
I'm not heading to Nashville.
That's right.
Don't worry.
That's right.
I think a couple things stand out to me. Number one is the intentionality, the consideration, the time that you put into it. And I think as parents, there's another thing we probably in this generation and proceeding forward are going to have to let go of, is that gone are the days in most situations, not always. You can go to some counties that this is very different. But some of us, not any of us, it doesn't sound like, had the experience of like, man, just like a fairy tale school experience where you had the same friends from kindergarten until you graduated high school, and the school situation was predetermined and it was totally fine. That's fine. That just isn't really what's going on today. Yeah. Things shift and move and change very, very quickly. And so as parents, one of the things we probably need to be is nimble and be evaluating consistently and constantly year after year just what's going on in that school. Who's my child's teacher? That matters. Who's the counselor? That matters. Who's the principal? That matters. It's kind of like, with government, like we spend all this time thinking about presidents. We probably should spend more time thinking about mayors and sheriffs. And, those are the folks who really matter at a grassroots level. And so that stands out to me. It sounds like you guys have been really considerate. What about you, man?
So my wife and I are both products of the public school. She went to a great public school in Louisville called Mayo High School. I hated them. I was at Fairdale. Rivals. We're both Bulldogs. Never thought I'd ever like anybody from Mayo. Ended up marrying one.
Yeah, I was a Bulldog. Dunbar Bulldog.
Yeah, that's right. She is a public school teacher. And then on top of that, I came to Christ when I was a junior in high school. And the tipping point was because of a humanities class with a Christian teacher who basically had different people come in, and just so happened the youth pastor that I just started going to church with came in and talked about Christianity, which led me to lots of questions. And so really, and then you layer on top of that student ministries. I've done student ministries for a long time. Did that in Louisville and did that here in Lexington, even at this church. There were Christian schools in both cities where we were, and to be honest, we had some great kids that came from those Christian schools, and we had some that we were like, gosh, they're kind of acting or behaving or doing some things, or their parties are bigger and worse than some of the stuff that's happening in public schools. And so in our minds, I'm going, and I didn't really grow up with it, don't really remember second grade, and also knowing that, hey, it's our job, again, Ephesians 6, to teach and train, to invest, to make sure that we do everything that we can to help them get spiritual roots, Colossians 2, that drive them. And so I have a 21-year-old who just got married. We were here. We were in Seattle. We were in Kansas City, and we've been back here. And so she's been in public schools her whole life. And even in Seattle, where it's very, very liberal, still it was fine. And it's our mindset's always been, we're in the world, not of it. We're going to shine. We're going to be lights and salt and blah, blah, blah. And so this summer was very different for us. I have a daughter that's in 6th grade. And then you start thinking of all these other things. You're going, well, let me learn about this school in our district, and, how can I learn a little bit more about their principal and what's going on. And then you've got also some things going on with SB 150, Senate Bill 150, and trying to figure out some of those things, what we're going to do, what we're not going to do. We say, well, we're actually not going to do this. So you're just trying to figure out what's best and what's going on, and then what's down the road as you look at, my wife who's a teacher. And again, she's solid. She's an adult. She knows who she is. She knows the Bible. She knows truth. And so she's totally fine to interact in that environment. But the question is where do we want? It's just different. I mean, my 21-year-old, what she encountered, what was going on in culture is very different than what our kids are now experiencing. And so we didn't have a lot of time. We started really processing this and praying through it, and just felt clarity that we decided we were going to send our 6th grader into a Christian school here in Lexington. And it's been great. Yeah. It's been great. I'm not relying on them to teach them God's word. I'm thankful that they do. They're just hopefully supplementing what we're doing. But it's not. The problem is it's not the school's job to do a lot of these things. And the problem is it's not just that they're neutral. Neutral is one thing, because hey, leave it alone. Leave it alone. Leave all these things alone. I don't need you to teach my kid about the birds and the bees. I don't need you to teach my kid about identity or gender. I don't need any of that. And so now there's become really just a culture shift where there's hostility toward. It's not just, hey, there's evolution, there's creation. We're going to teach both. You can do what you want, but there's a test coming, so you need to explain it, whatever. And I get secular universities where, you know what, people have been around and they're going to drive whatever they want to drive. It's just a different culture. And so we had to really pray hard and ask some good questions and talk to some people that we trusted. And I am also like you, and it's funny that you're in this place too, where your kids have fluctuated in and out of some of those things. I mean, your son, your oldest, he left that to go into, and so I'm sure we'll talk about that. But I just know that we're doing that now. Yeah. I know middle school's hard. I know girls, it's hard. You and I've read Irrevocable Damage, that book about
damage,
irreversible damage, pronouns, and people who don't, and parents who are just rock solid on, hey, you just chase whatever you feel like doing. I mean, those are things that I go, and it's tight. Budget-wise, it's tight, but in essence, we're in a place where we're going to choose our problems a little bit. And again, not that Christian school is perfect, and there's all kinds of kids for all kinds of reasons, and they need Jesus too. But the reality is, we monitor everything.
Yeah,
we monitor these phones if they have them. We monitor what they listen to, what they watch. We have password protection stuff on all of our devices, on their streaming stuff. So why wouldn't we?
Precisely.
I mean, somebody comes knocking at your door.
Yeah.
I don't know, no, you're not getting in.
Right.
You're not getting in. Or no, we're not going to watch that on YouTube.
Right.
So they're going to spend 8 hours a day somewhere. And again, I'm not anti-public school. I love public school. And we have some teachers and administration from our church that are trying to make a difference.
They're
I
missionaries.
thank God that they're doing that. But I have to go, what does my kid need?
Yeah.
Right.
And what's the investment I need to make? Because I get them for this period of time, and then it's gone.
Exactly. And I think press and pause right there is important, even before I get into this next thing that I'll talk about. But you can wage a war on two fronts at the same time. Okay. And I think it's important for parents to hear this, that you may be deeply passionate about reforming public schools.
Yep.
Or reforming whatever school that, and that is probably going to be a long haul project. That's probably not going to happen overnight.
Yeah.
You can be as involved in that as you want to be, as you feel called by God to be. Simultaneously, you've got these kids over here that grow up in the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always feel like that when they're in second grade or third grade or whatever. But now, where I sit, where you sit, you'll be there soon. It's very obvious. This is a very short window. Yeah. And so whatever it is that I believe to be true that needs to be reformed over here, I still have to make a decision today that is best for this child. So my decision that is best for this child is not always an indictment necessarily of what is going on over here. It's just what I believe is best to be true for this child in this moment. So if people would just kind of lay down their arms, because this is what happens oftentimes. Somebody like you takes you, man, I thought you were a public school guy, man. How could you do that? How could you turn your? Well, hold on a second.
Yeah.
I'm talking about my daughter.
Yeah, that's it.
Let's talk. We can have that discussion over here, but don't presume to know what's best for my daughter. I think that's vital to understand, and maybe parents need to let themselves off the mat in that regard.
It's complex.
It's complicated, man. My journey. I mean, it's funny because I think probably some people have some preconceived notions about my convictions on this. I was always, if anything, anti-Christian school, which sounds really funny for somebody in my seat to say, but I had such bad experiences and saw such hypocrisy. Yeah. And I always say I had to go to Dunbar to find Jesus. I didn't really settle into my faith until I was well into my public school time at Dunbar. And so, I was, if anything, when we decided to have children, way more on the side of let's send them to public school. My wife graduated from the very school that I got kicked out of. So we had both kind of, she had fine experience. I had a not good experience. Right. So my idea in my head going into parenting was, man, we want our kids to be salt and light in these institutions, in this place. We want them to experience being around lost people. We want them to experience being around different people. I don't want them to be inoculated to Jesus, as I always say, So that was our aim. So things started to shift for us a little bit, not because of, and again, my kids were in Boulder, right outside Boulder, Colorado,
Right.
So I was talking about time travel. We saw some things happen out there that are just now happening in Kentucky. But what actually gave me the crisis, of maybe we need to pay a little better attention was when I was trying to help Eli with math one day. He was in like third grade. And, I was looking over his shoulder and he was confused. And I was looking at this problem and I just went, man, just carry the 1.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and went, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And I went, carry the 1. What are all these pictures you're drawing? All these sticks and circles and all this stuff. Like, just carry the 1. He hadn't been taught math that way.
Yeah.
And so I was like,
new math.
What are you talking about? This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
So me being me, I did this deep dive on, this new math that was being taught and where it was coming from and Common Core and all these different kinds of things that sent me down this rabbit hole of studying how government school got started, what its intent was, and where we are now. That led me to believe, like, man, I don't think this is going to be the best education where we were at the time for our children. We had Landry who was getting ready to go to middle school, and so we started making some adjustments, did some homeschooling things. The boys stayed in public school while we were out there, and then when we came here, we decided, man, we really want our kids to have this classical Christian education model. Now, people can go off and do a deep dive on what that is and what that's all about. It's based on truth, beauty, and goodness. It's a cool thing. Now, all that being said, with my 4 children, we have still embraced this mindset of let's parent to the personality, one of the best things that Weiss ever said to me.
Yeah.
And we've made different decisions along the way. I just had a parent recently just asking me about their daughter who's going into middle school, and Landry got to escape a lot of the craziness that happens for girls in middle school because she was homeschooled during that time.
Yeah.
I don't regret that decision at all.
Yeah.
It's not for everybody, but man, it was good for her. And so I was trying to encourage this parent to go, there's nothing wrong with you going, man, for a season, if we can just extricate you from this craziness, make sure that you're in a good place, and maybe you jump back in with, in a different school at a different time, that's fine. But I think parents have to embrace this idea of, hey, let's do what's best and right for our kids in this situation. And you may get involved with a school where you go, man, this was a bad decision, And that's hard to bounce your kids around and things like that. And not everybody even can do that.
Correct.
But there's more of a school choice opportunity than there's ever been in most places going on today. So let me kind of throw this into the water. Just got a email from a parent the other day, won't disclose who they were, what school that their child goes to, but this is not an uncommon email. This was just one of the longer ones that I've gotten recently, where under the banner of social and emotional learning in the public schools, a book was being read, and it was an assignment. It was a book that had to be read to or listened to on a YouTube thing, and then there was going to be a test taken, and it was all about gender and identity, and it was men dressing as women. It was all the things that we see on the national news, if you paid much attention. And so there's this mindset of betrayal that, this parent was going through, man, the school has been so good to us. We've had a great experience. And then this happens, and so this parent was trying to figure out how to best approach it. Yeah. So there's parents out there that are dealing with this right now, They thought, man, the teacher in our classroom is awesome, but this wasn't through the teacher. This was through the school counselor. The principal wasn't paying attention to what the counselor was implementing. And so there's been this back and forth going on. I don't think that this is going to slow down anytime soon on a grand scale. It may be slowed down in certain schools and certain places at certain times, but to your point, parents have got to be paying attention and paying close attention. What else do you think parents can do when that has happened, or some kind of red flag goes up? What do you think are some of the best steps those parents can take in those moments?
I think this keeps coming back to me, and you've said something that's triggered it a few times, but there are opportunities for us to have conversations with our kids because these things are happening. And it is important that they hear these things from us, because at least for a time, especially the age that my kids are right now, they believe me. You know what I mean? They're like, oh yeah, mom knows, dad knows. If they hear it from somewhere else, and I think Alicia Childers said this actually when she was here doing our women's conference, if they hear it from someone else, we are no longer the point of authority on that. So
you're counter-punching.
Right.
The first punch has been thrown,
And that's what they're going to remember. And I mean, we're going to make mistakes. I'm not saying like there has to be perfection in it, but I do think it's important that we are aware of what's happening and that we've done our research, and also that we're aware of what they could be exposed to so that we're not taken by surprise. So while it's good to, if you need to go to the school board and talk to them, or you need to talk to the teacher or the counselor or whatever action you may take, I think the first thing you have to do is talk to your kids. Because if they don't hear that and you skip that step, they're figuring out what to believe based on something else.
Yeah. And it needs to be said, regardless of what environment your child is in, Christian school, homeschool, co-op, if they are outside of your home and around other people who have devices and who have the internet and have what they're going to be exposed to, whether you like it or not, is probably going to be something you don't want them to see or hear sooner than you want them to see it or hear it. So, we give these disclaimers sometimes with our content on the weekends, like, hey, today's content probably not appropriate for anybody under sixth grade. There inevitably are always parents who, get fired up and go, well, my sixth grader was in there and I still thought it was inappropriate. And, it's hard not to respond and go, you are not paying close attention to what's going on in our culture.
You're late to the game.
You're very late to the game. So if you've not had those first conversations, my encouragement to parents would be you're going to need to have sex conversations a lot sooner than you want to, sooner than your parents had them, if they had them with you. And you better get there early and often. And you better have an ongoing conversation about what did you see, what did you hear. If they're on a school bus, you cannot control. I was just having this conversation the other day. If they have a device, what happens is kids airdrop things, and if your phone is open, it's going to hit your child's eyes
because of proximity.
Whether they want them to or not. When there's a fight at a high school, the video gets sent to every kid in the school within 10 seconds of it happening, and anything else that a student might want to send is sent.
Pics.
So you better get there early and often.
It's so hard because there's a tension of, one, it's our job, and so we should go there first. The other side of it is, the disappearance of their childhood.
Yes.
I mean,
innocence.
Yeah, what my 21-year-old sixth grader knew.
Yes.
And what my now 11-year-old and fifth grade 11-year-old fifth and sixth graders know. It's totally different. And it's such a hard thing to. It's like Sarah and I will watch movies. But there's certain movies that they can't watch. And there's certain movies that Sarah doesn't want to watch that I watch. It's like these, whether it's war-torn or whatever. I mean, there's just things that it's just not appropriate for them at this age, at this stage. They don't have the emotional infrastructure to be able to handle that, or maybe even the intellectual or even spiritual infrastructure. And so in this, now we're in a place where, and there was always some amount of morality, but I'm not going to use morality when it comes to schools. We're really talking about truth. It's really what we're talking about. And then we're talking about truth under the veil of identity and gender and sexuality.
Right.
And I don't need anybody else to do that. The only other person that I want to do that is the church.
Yes.
And so for those families that get really pissed at you or John because of the conversations that we're having, it's like, hey, listen, sorry you didn't get there first, but guess what? The next best version is in this place where this book that we cherish and that we value and that we want to embody and we want to impart. That's super incredible, which is just what Ephesians 6 says.
That's right.
This is our job as a church to empower people.
Yeah. There's kind of a few different mentalities out there when it comes to parenting. One is like, and this, I'll be honest, I embraced it early on, was like, just throw them in the deep end and they'll learn to swim. And they'll become salt and light in that environment. Maybe. Or they'll become like that environment. That is a real possibility. The other is, let's circle the wagons and let's try to keep all the bad things and bad people out. Now, very few people have the financial means to be able to actually pull that off, at a significant level. And even then, there's remarkable vulnerabilities to it. And then the problem is, you're there. And they're there. And guess what? Where there's a person, there's sin. And so you're not going to be able to keep all the sin away. And then what happens when that child leaves the fortress that you've had the financial wherewithal to create?
Peace out,
oftentimes, and we as student ministers saw this happen all the time, they go nuts. They go crazy. Sometimes for a season, sometimes for the rest of their life. And so those are the two extremes, and I don't believe that either one of those is the right extreme. So even if your child is in a public government run school, there is a way to interact in that environment where you're not just throwing them to the wolves. And if there isn't, then you probably need to consider getting them out.
Yeah.
You know,
And it's okay to have the conversations. I remember our kids are a part of a great elementary school here in Lexington, maybe one of the best ones. And I remember some of the stuff that was coming home, and it was like, you know what, I'm just going to see if I can have a conversation. And I came in. I didn't come in, with my banners or with my, my flags or my torches. I just said, hey, I just want to learn a little bit more about the direction of where some of this is going. Do you know anything? And what are your counselors sharing? Is there some stuff that's been passed to you that you have to, and she happens to be a Catholic principal here, and I love her. I love her. She's been unbelievable. That school culture is great. But as sometimes this stuff is outside there. We have some great teachers and great counselors and great administration and staff, people on boards and all these things. But the reality is, it doesn't always land on them, and so I had to really wrestle. Did we cross a value in our home? Because we love Jesus, and we want. There are times where we have to insulate our kids, but we cannot isolate them. Right. We live in the world,
That's a great
and we have to love people, and not all the people we're going to hang out with are going to know Jesus and love Jesus, because that's what He calls us to do. But in this scenario, did we cross a line of value for us? And the reality is, again, we had to weigh all of that and had to think through this in process, and we landed, this is where we are for now. How long? We don't know.
Yeah. I mean, when you consider, my child's going to be in this environment for this amount of time each day and throughout the year, I think it's important to say, okay, the person that they're around the most, so in elementary school, that teacher that runs their classroom, maybe there's a counselor that's involved a lot, principals, those kinds of folks, coaches. Can I trust their intentions towards my child?
Yeah.
Now, if there's a question there, that's worth paying attention to.
Sure.
On a broader scale, can you trust the intentions towards our children in our culture, in the government? I think that's a clear and present no. Which means there's things in the water, there's things in the system that may be more present in some schools than others, or less present in some schools than others. But it's there.
Correct.
It's there, and you got to be paying attention to it, because if you have a teacher that you can trust, they might be able to find ways to go, we're not doing that today. I can think of ways.
Some way right now.
I know of a high school principal around here right now that finds ways to push those things aside and clear the way for Christian teachers to do what they know is right and true. Yeah. So there is a little bit of a conversation we can have here at the end around teachers, and I think an encouragement that we can give to them, because I think it's vital to be able to say to teachers, wherever they are, the role that you play is very important.
Crucial.
The role that you play never usurps the role of a parent,
right,
for good or for bad. And that's the tricky thing.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of this was born on the idea of, there are a lot of really bad parents out there, so we've got to address some of these things in schools. The problem with that is it's still that parent's responsibility, and you still can't usurp a parent's authority.
Right.
So that's where it created a pathway where it just kept getting broader and wider. Yeah, you know what parents should do? Feed their kids. Yeah. Sometimes they don't, so we'll feed them at school. That's a great thing. Right. Yeah. It's still that parent's responsibility, and there's reasons why some of them can't do that. So all that to say, maybe speak some words of encouragement, you guys, to teachers out there who have to view their role, especially in public schools, as a missionary role. If you're a Christian teacher, what would you guys say to teachers in Christian schools and in public schools?
It makes me feel like Daniel. A lot of these teachers just feel like Daniel. They are a citizen of another world, and in it you have to figure out how do you navigate well. You think about Nehemiah at the very beginning of the first chapter. It's there. You're going. I have such a heart for my city or for my people, or for these people, but again, we're playing an away game. I mean, Paul's these words are an away game, And
Jess, so that's a sports metaphor.
Yes, I know. I caught it. It wasn't wrestling though.
Yeah, that's right. But it's one of those things where we're going. However, we can support you and encourage you, and I love even how our church does teacher appreciation stuff and backpack programs and mentoring and things like that. If we can figure out better ways to partner with you, we would love to be able to do that. It's hard. My wife loves the mess, and she has a lot of mess around her, and she's got a lot of great Christian teachers around her, and just great teachers. Yeah. But it's exhausting. Yeah. and you're walking into people that you have to reset the expectations every single day, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
But she loves these kids, and she's for these kids, and she doesn't get to go out and just go, hey, listen, we're going to crack open the Word here. She gets to figure out a way how to demonstrate Jesus' love by the way that she lives, by the way that she treats them, by the way she has expectations for them and believes in them. And so please keep doing that as long as you can. And it's one of those things where some people are going to have families where we go, nope, we're just going to figure out a way to lock them in, and they have the right infrastructure and they're ready to do this, and so our kids are going to just keep blowing in and out every day of public school, and that's okay too. But figuring out how can you encourage those Christian kids to even get more solid, and for them to know that they're not alone because you're there as a teacher or an administration or a staff member or whatever. That's right. I think that's a beautiful thing, and of course you always got to be careful because no matter what you do, there's people that will show up and protest and cancel you and call for your job. And, as it gets tighter and tighter, the walls feels like it's moving in closer and closer. I think that just shows, hey, we're just going to try to live distinctly and differently. And if you're in these roles, view that as a missionary. Yep. And however we can support you, we would love to be able to do that. Yep.
And we do. Also, if you're listening and you don't know this, we do pray for you often. Yeah. Often. I know parents of this church do as well, but also just the staff in general. I agree with everything you said. The example that you live by a lot of times speaks far louder than your words ever will. So by teachers influencing kids simply by how their hearts are and the joy they have as they come in, even though days are hard or whatever it may be, that's what I remember about my teachers. Yeah. That's what these kids are going to remember. That's what they're going to take away. And that's oftentimes where even adults see, oh, there's something different. I don't know what it is. There's something different there. So I think that's important to make sure that you keep doing that even when you don't see the fruit of it, which kind of is a theme in life in general. Keep going, be faithful, stay the course. But also, I think it's important the relationship that teachers have with parents as well. I think we always think about their influence on kids, and it is huge, but also you're influencing parents as well. And that's a big deal. It's a big deal. There are a lot of people that you will never, ever know that you made a huge impact on because of how you affected their kids or because of the conversation you had in a parent-teacher conference or whatever it might be. But that doesn't go unnoticed either, and you're making changes on that front as well.
Kids have a very highly attuned BS meter, so they know if you're faking. If you don't love them, they'll know it.
Exactly.
So if you don't love them and you're in there, you got to get out. That you're not helping anybody. Yeah. But if you do, thank you. Thank you so much. I'll end on kind of a funny story. One of my kids, actually, I'm pretty sure it was Eli. He was in, second grade, third grade, something like that. We get called in for, parent-teacher meeting kind of thing. And, I remember these things. I remember how they're supposed to go. We've been through a few of them, but they had made some sort of shift where it was no longer parent-teacher meetings. It was parent-teacher-child meetings. So you're supposed to bring your kid with you to the meeting. Okay. And so you all sit down in those little chairs at those little desks and everything.
I feel like Shaq.
You feel silly. It's very weird. And my, Eli, he's been the same his whole life. So what you see out of him now is what he was like then, except 7 or whatever. And he didn't want to go back to school. He's been there all day. Right. I don't want to go. So Allie's like grabbing us both by the ear and sitting us down. Yeah. And they had this little piece of paper in every subject that math, science, and whatever. And then there was these like the pain scale, like the pain, like you're on like a 0 to 10 with the faces. It was like that. It's like, how do you feel about math? And so the child was supposed to lead through the parent-teacher conference.
At 7.
At 7. And I'm sitting there going, what's happening right now? What are we doing? What is this? Then Allie's
is he starting his own business next week?
Like kneeing me under the table, but I'm like seeing all the flaws in this from my perspective. And when we got to like how he feels about math, and he's like circling a frowny face and all that, and I'm like, hey, I don't care how he feels about it. What's his grade?
Yeah.
Is he doing good or bad?
Yeah.
I'm like, actually, he's doing fine. Like, yeah, well, I hated math my whole life too.
So what?
That's great. You know,
There's a lot of things I don't like doing.
right?
How do you feel
I don't even
about it?
care how he feels about
Yeah,
it.
it doesn't matter. Yeah, it
Because
doesn't
he
matter.
couldn't carry the one until you taught him
That's
to.
right.
exactly right. Or I outsourced to someone who does know how, and I oversaw it. Yeah, exactly.
Hey,
So-
I think it's important for us to say, hey, we're not telling everybody to run for the hills.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, yeah.
And the other side of it too is if you have your kids in Christian school,
Yes.
you better not take your foot off the gas pedal.
Right. The only thing worse than a bad public school is a bad Christian school in name only.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's the worst.
Yeah.
You know, hypocrisy is way worse than authentic evil.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's a good statement.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good statement.
hey, everybody, we love you. We thank you for listening today, and catch us next time on the Parenting Podcast.